All right, you are tuned in to the New Music Alliance radio hour. I'm Mal Thursday, and that was Zeke Fiddler, and that was from his album Waterproof from 1993 on Spin Art, and that was a song called Bug Lamp. Before that, we heard Spouse with Long Live the Bay State, which I included on Hotel Massachusetts Deluxe Edition, an anthology of bands that played the Bay State Hotel between 1992 and 2001. And I believe that one was recorded outside of those parameters, but it tells the story. Then we had Sebadoh with a song called Skull, which was originally featured as the opening track on Hotel Massachusetts in 1994 on Chunk Records. And I reissued that record in 2021 as a deluxe 2 CD set. So it's twice as long as it used to be.
So we just heard the last song that we played was the Zeke Fiddler song Bug Lamp. And Zeke Fiddler and his band was from New Haven, Connecticut and Western Mass. And
Zeke was a New Haven native, and then he matriculated at Hampshire College in its indie rock heyday, when New Radiant Storm King was there, and Elliott Smith, and it was a wild time in the woods in Western Massachusetts. And Zeke put together this band, which featured Jay Mascis on drums and Peyton Pinkerton and Matt Hunter from New Radiant Storm King, and recorded this brilliant album in 1991. And it was ahead of its time, and it was, to some ears, on par with Nirvana's Nevermind as a really great album of that era. But he signed a very disadvantageous record deal with a local label, and his record was held up in legal limbo for 2 years. So by the time it came out, there'd been dozens upon hundreds of bands treading those grungy waters, So by the time his record came out, it didn't sound as fresh as it would have 2 years earlier, which is a shame because it's brilliant.
Mel, thank you for taking us down memory lane to the late 80s, early 90s. I love this. Had a Screaming Trees Buffalo Tom vibe. I just love the song.
Yeah, and that whole record is brilliant. And he has an entire second unreleased album that he did at Studio 45 down in Hartford with Tom Monahan producing. He did a single for Chunk Records, Half Baked and Half Inflated. And Half Baked is on Hotel Massachusetts, and that's one that, that's one that everybody knows of his, or not everybody, but people who like this music. And I say, along with my proposal for a Western Mass Music Hall of Fame, I say that somebody needs to do the complete recordings of Zeke Fiddler 1991 to 1995. And I would do it. Again, I can't afford the double album vinyl, but that's a record that's going to have so many great songs, and his second unreleased record is full of gems. So
wow. So before that, we had a song by Spouse, Long Live the Bay State, which is a Western Mass icon. And as you mentioned in the beginning of the show, Mel, that this is a place that you spent a lot of time at, the Bay State, huh?
Yes, from 92 to 95, we did the Bay State Cabaret. I was able to bring in touring acts. I had Arthur Lee and Love, Royal Trucks, the Grifters, just a bunch of bands. I mean, the New Bomb Turks. I loved that show. That was a good show. Anyway, we had a really good thing going those years, particularly 93, 94. And my label was, it was sort of symbiotic because, I would see a band live and I'm like, go make a record and let's put it in Chunk. And it was a fairly inexpensive process then. And we were able to turn things around quickly. And, what happened was there's always a number of people who say I could do that just as equally well or better. And what happens is you have a little scene that's based, on a very small population. There's only so many people going to these shows, right? Often less than 100, and that's a good show. And so all of a sudden, they have the Grotto over by Smith, and they had the not to be confused with the New Haven Grotto, which was booked by Mark Mulcahy of Miracle Religion back in the day. And then they're doing shows at the bowling alley. Well, what happens is the audience just gets diluted, and so by the end of '95, Ron at the Bay State decided to cut my pay, and I just got married, so then he fired me. It's a long story.
Well, this song, "Long Live the Bay State" by Spouse, I think it's a great tune to bring back that feeling of being at the Bay State.
Yes, it really does, and they are such a great band, and they've endured and continue to play. Jose is just a great writer, and they make great records. And ultimately, if the music holds up, who cares if your old venue is now a dispensary?
And we started out that block with Sebadoh doing Skull. And Sebadoh is another Western Mass band. This is a song back from 1994. And Sebadoh is, I guess, known as a band that Lou Barlow and Eric Gaffney put together. And I guess Lou used it as his outlet for his songwriting.
Yeah, and then Jason came. They became more of a real. They were tight little indie rock power trio, and I guess there was a falling out, and then Bob Fay came in to play drums. He's on this track. Eric was still the drummer. The most important show of the Bay State Cabaret was January of '93. No, yeah, I guess January '93. And we'd been doing shows the previous year, here and there. But this was just when Sebadoh was they were just signing with Sub Pop. They were blowing up. They had "Gimme Indie Rock" was a great single they had. And anyway, they had a lot of buzz about them. And I had booked a triple bill already of some indie rock stuff. And they came to my apartment, all three of them were like, "Yeah, can we be on that show?" And I was like, "Why not?" So we ended up packing out the Bay State well beyond its fire marshal mandated 142 capacity. And that's the next day Ron offered me the job to book shows there on the regular. So it was, so they led off Hotel Massachusetts for a reason. They were the catalyst for that whole scene taking off. And because Northampton at the time, we had Sheehan's Cafe was closing, and Sheehan's for years had been where all the local bands played. It was where my band had played in the '80s. And all of a sudden it's a ladies' clothing store, and there was a vacuum in that scene, and I think we filled it admirably. And my years, I can say this completely subjectively, we're head and shoulders above what came after.
Cool. Well, we have one block left, and we've got three more great tunes by Raymond and the Circle, Robert Sherwood, and Dinosaur Jr. And that's who we're starting out with Repulsion.